Is August 6th, 2006. I am Sarah Locker. It is a pleasure to conduct this interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project in Calm, North Dakota. Can you state your full name?
Norman Leroy Rost.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Edgeley, North Dakota in September 29th, 1930.
Did you ever hear any interesting stories about your birth?
Not about my birth, but after 2 years, then we moved to south of Cullum, and all these things that I'm going to have to tell you, that they were more or less told to me, until I was probably 5 years old. From there, I remember, But I do know that when we moved down to that place, there was in the house, there was upstairs, and they had a furnace in the basement, a gravity, and then going up to the upstairs, there was registers. And of course, this one of them was all about this big, square, and there was no register on there, so I fell through. And I still have a scar on my my eyebrows from falling onto one of those old Davenports. Is that what you want to know?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And who told you that story?
Well, my folks, mom, dad, or what, But they always said I was one of those that was inquisitive, wanted to know everything, had to check everything out.
What was it like growing up on the plains? What did you think of growing up in this environment, dealing with the summers and the winters here?
Well, we didn't know any better. I mean, that's the way it was, I mean, there was my mom and dad, and then I had two sisters and a brother, and then a half brother that were older than I am. And at the age of 6 years old, I started grade school. You know, we had to walk. What was it? A little over a mile. We walked to school in nice weather. Of course, if it was ugly, then the dad would take us. And then, of course, there was teacher stayed at our place, and she had taught the year before when my sister started. Ruth, this was her name, and she was a year older than I am. And then, of course, Anne, my sister, she was the oldest one of my true sister, And then Clifford was my true brother, and Albert was actually a half brother. We had the same dad, but we had different mothers. My dad's first wife died, and then he got married to my mother. And of course, there was another little girl, but she died as an infant. She had pneumonia, and I guess at that time they didn't, know or whatever.
With going to school,
Okay.
did you speak German before you went
Absolutely, absolutely. I got punished for it. Now, well, we didn't know. We didn't talk English. At that time we didn't talk English. And they were real strict at that time as far as teaching you how to talk English. But it was hard because that's all we knew at age 6. That's all we knew was German. And of course, we talked the High German, which was on my dad's side. They used to say, you talk or learn your mother's language, But in our case, my mother learned how to talk the High German from my dad, and that's the way all of us kids. See, and there was 10 of us kids, and we all talked the High German except for my youngest brother. He was quite small, and he had fell in the water. He just started talking, and he was running around in the spring, and he fell in the water. And after that, didn't talk for a long time. And after that, he never did learn how to talk German. He would talk English, and my dad would talk German, and they got along real good. So we did a lot of horseback riding. Especially me and my brother. My brother died when he was 17 years old in 1949 in December, but we were real close. He was, he was born in 32, I believe, and I was born in 30, so there was about 2 years, not quite 2 years different, but I mean, we was together a lot. I mean, we done a lot of dumb things. Some things I wish we wouldn't have done, but I guess that's one of those things.
Do you have any stories of your brother and yours adventures that you want to share? Of some of the things you guys did?
I don't know. There's one thing I remember real well. We had a neighbor. We had some neighbors, and we went to the same school. And me and my brother and my sister, my younger brother next to me, and Ruth, my sister, we went over to these people, to visit, play or whatever, And anyway, they had a windmill. It wasn't very high, but it was a windmill with a wooden frame, And the dumb thing didn't turn into the wind by itself, so they had a long wire tied to the tail of the windmill. You know what that is? Tail of a windmill?
Could you explain it?
Uh, okay, now they had a wire tied on here, down, And of course I crawled up, on the windmill. And somebody on the ground pulled that wire and turned it and hit me in the head. Cut me, there's a scar there. I mean, I don't know if you can see it, but anyway.
Did you fall all the way down, or did it just
No, I crawled down, I come down. It could have been bad, but it wasn't, it was just cut, So anyway, we went home. I'm not sure, but I know it was my sister and myself and then my brother, and I don't know if there was any besides three of us. But anyway, when I come home, well, I was bleeding and I had a cut in my head, So then I had to walk another 3/4 of a mile to get, not sure now, Epsom salt or peroxide, one or the other, So anyway, then they come home and then Ma washed it and cleaned it up and everything. And then they wanted to know what happened, and then we said we were driving bicycles and we run together. We didn't tell them we crawled up on the windmill. Got hit by the windmill head, Other than that, let's see, and that then when I was 6 years. And then in 1938, we got our first tractor, and I drove that on the binder, pulling the grain binder, binding or cutting grain. That would have been in 38, 39, and then in 40, we got a different tractor. The first one we had, that was all on steel, And then in 1940, then we got a John Deere Model A, and that had rubber tires on it, and we were cutting oats, and that was in July the 18th, I believe, right? Was Ernest's birthday at the 18th? Anyway, we were binding oats, and I know I was driving the tractor. My dad was on the binder, and Ma wasn't home. When we come home, found out that she was in Jamestown, had a baby. And he's 10 years younger than I am. But there's two brothers in between, Other than that, what more can I say?
How did you guys feel and react to the younger brothers and sisters as they came home? What did you think of them?
Gee, just another baby. Really, I mean, like I say, at age 6, I can remember, 7, 8, and then when it was 7 and 8, I mean, I know a lot of these things that were going on, and I was a farm boy. I was out there, if anything was to be done, Norman did it. I mean, because I was out there and I was ambitious enough, so. Other than that, as far as bothering to being my oldest sister was home, and of course I had two sisters which were both older than I am, and I mean they more or less, you might say, by that time they were old enough to take care of the babies, and then my mother would be out in the field again, helping, shocking grain, or even when we was headering, I would be on the header box, and I was just a little chafer, but anyway, I'd be on the header box, and the horses were pretty well trained, but I didn't have the reins, and then, well, they were headering. I don't know if you know anything about a header. They cut the grain, and then it elevates it onto a wagon. and I was, like I say, just a little stinker, and I would get covered up with the grain that was coming in. I didn't like that too well. uh, then from there on, well, then we went to binding and shocking, and like I say, I was there all the time.
Let's talk a little more about the farming. When would you begin getting the fields ready for a farming season?
Oh, anytime after March. They tried to get the crop in right around the 15th of April. At that time, of course, then it was all horses, from up until 1938, they done everything with the horses. And then after we got one tractor, the first tractor, well, then that one done more or less the heavier work like plowing and cultivating. But we done all the haying with the horses, and I done a lot of that. Mowing hay with the horses, raking hay with the horses, sweeping hay, with a sweep rake, which you don't know nothing about. But anyway,
How does that work? What is a sweeping foot?
the what?
What is that? What does it do?
Okay, a mower. You know what a mower is? Okay, that that had a 5 foot bar on it, and then we had two mowers going, me and my brother, or me and my dad, or something. And then when we raked it, that would rake it and then rake it on piles, okay. And then they would rake it and then drag it to the pile, and then they'd pitch it up. Somebody was on the stack and laying it, flatten it out, and the other guys would pitch it up by fork. Well, then that got to be a little bit more work, harder work. So then we got a sweep rake, and there it was pretty wide, and you had a horse on each side, and then you had teeth, like this. You'd sweep this up, bunch this hay up, and then bring it to the stack. And then my dad had ropes coming down, and you'd push this hay on them ropes, and then when that had a big pile on there, then they'd roll it up on the stack. But that got to be a lot of work too, so they got away from that. Then they got an overshot hay stacker, okay? Then with the sweep rake, we'd sweep this hay on, the pile of hay onto the stacker, and when you had a big pile on there, then you would take the team of horses, and they would pull through ropes and everything, and they'd bring the stacker up like this and dump it onto the haystack. And then it would slide off, and then somebody on the haystack, he would smoothen it out again and let it down, and I'd come back with another sweep full of hay. That was all loose hay, we didn't, at that time, we didn't have balers or anything like that, And that was used then up until, about 1947, I believe, and then we got a baler, square baler, Idiot blocks, he called them. But anyway, that was my job. Baling, running the baler, baling the hay, that was my job. Mowing and baling. I didn't like to rake. I did rake, but after we got a baler, then we got what they call a side delivery rake. You drive down the field and it would make windrows, They roll it together, and then you pick it up, So, but getting back to raking with a dump rake, Dad had two of them, and they were old. They were, and anyway, when the rake was down, you was raking, and then when you wanted to dump, you had pushed your foot on a lever, and then it would dump, go back down. But over here, there was a deal it would be like this, and when you had your foot on there, that held your rake teeth down. But when you dumped it, then this dump thing wouldn't break, it wouldn't bend, then you'd have to kick it, do it like this, And we didn't have shoes. We were barefooted, and I had to do that with my bare feet, And that was scary. Well, then after so many years, then my dad got a brand new John Deere rake, And that was just, oh man, that was just like driving a Cadillac, And then everything was fine there, and then my brother had a runaway with the horses. And he jumped off the back. He didn't get hurt. And of course, the pole broke off and the wheels bent, and everything. So then Dad had to recondition it. And of course, after that, we didn't use that no more because we got a side delivery rake. And like I said, then you just kept driving and it always rolled the rake or the hay and windrows, and then I'd bale it.
When you got the field ready before planting, what was it like trying to get the fields ready? Both before you had any machinery and after you got machinery.
Well, as far as before we had machinery, I don't know nothing about that. But when after that, Dad, got well, he started farming with two horses, and then of course when I was old enough, well, then they used uh, one bottom plow. They had three horses on there. Well, then Dad got a two bottom plow, and most people used five horses on a two bottom plow, but they had them spread out five side by side. But my dad didn't like that because the one horse over here, that horse had to go on the field that was plowed, and that was hard. That was soft. I mean, that was hard on the horse. So then he would go here, and he'd have three horses in the back and two in front. Pulling a two bottom plow. I remember it real well, but I never done that because I was just that. That was, well, I would have been 6, 7 years old. Hey, wait a minute. Remember that. But anyway, my older brothers, Albert and my dad, Albert, would have been my half brother. He was old enough, and then of course my mother did plow too. Mostly mom and dad did because they were all not old enough. And then when they got the seeder was the horses. Dad had two drills, grain drills, and there too. Most people had four horses on the drill, but he had six. And that drill was, I think, like 10 feet wide. And then there was a pole over here and a pole over here, and you had two horses inside and one on each side. But like I say, Dad didn't like to work his horses that hard, so he had six horses. Then he got another drill, but then he needed two more horses, so then he went back to four horses on each drill. Then my dad run one and my mother run the other one. And I'm not, yeah, I do remember. I do remember that. They had filled the grain, the drill with seed and everything, and for some reason or another, Dad's horses took off. And for some reason, my mother had walked away or stepped aside, and Dad's team horses run right over Mom's drill and smashed that drill all to pieces. But from there on, I don't remember how this all, that, I remember that's what happened, but I don't know just exactly, but I know one drill was damaged. So then after that, then that's when Dad got the tractor, and then he took the horse poles off and put on a hitch to pull it with the tractor, so that's how we seeded the grain then. But anyway, before they done that, they plowed it, and then they dragged it. There was no cultivator at that time. They just plowed it, with the horses, and then they dragged it with the horses. And I don't remember if I did maybe a little bit, but I would have been too small. But I think I did walk behind the drag, walk behind the drag. Then later on they got a cart, then whoever dragged, and then there I think they used four horses with it. Must have been about a 25-foot drag, and I quite sure that Clifford, my brother, he was 3 years older than I am. I think he did drag, but he isn't alive no more. He died. It'll be 2 years in November now. But anyway, he did. Seems to me he did drag. If not, then Mom did. And of course, when that was all done, then they seeded it. Sometimes after it was seeded, they would drag it. Sometimes they didn't. It just depends on the shape the ground was in. To smoothen it out. And of course, that's all you did until during you done the haying, and then after haying, you went into harvest. And like I say, that's when we bindered and headered and so on.
So while you were waiting for the crops to grow, what would be the chores then around the farm to do?
Making hay, milking cows, hauling manure, fixing fence, repairing the buildings. If you had paint or shingling, something like that.
Did you all help out, or did certain
Well,
siblings have certain chores?
Well, like milking there too. I mean, I hated to milk, but I did have to milk. My oldest sister, I don't remember if she ever milked. My other sister did. My oldest sister is not alive no more, but my other sister, she's a year older than I am. She did milk, but she didn't like to, which I didn't either, but we still had to do it. And then, of course, we had, to clean the barns and make sure that the cattle stayed in the fence. And, of course, then they had chickens and ducks and geese and whatever, and they all had to be taken care of, fed and taken care of. Hogs, slop the hogs, and feed the baby calves, and
Plenty to do. Did you butcher your animals as
oh, you
well?
bet, yeah.
When would you butcher them?
Why?
When?
Usually in the fall. I don't know. Let's say, I would say probably in October, November, and at the time that I remember, they would just butcher the hogs, and then sometimes they'd butcher sheep for meat at combine or at harvest time. If they had thrashing people, then they butcher a beef or not a beef, either a hog or even a sheep or a goat. But the beef they didn't butcher because the mothers they used or the females they used, for breeding, and the males they were sold for income. But then they had, like I say, they had turkeys, they had geese, they had ducks, chickens. That was all done in the fall, like I say. Uh, oh, I know even at harvest time, Ma would butcher chickens, for the meals, when we were alone. But then when they had the thrashing crews, then they, like I say, then they'd butcher a sheep or a goat or something. And of course the hogs they were butchered, you know, and then there was no refrigerators or nothing. They would just butcher it and put it in barrels, salt it down good and proper, and keep it cold. And like I say, there was no refrigerator, so like the milk and cream that was put in either in gallon cans or jugs or whatever, and then hung in the well to keep it cold. And I think if I remember right, some of this meat and stuff they would do that for a while. That didn't last too long, but I mean, they still done it for a while. So that's something that you guys don't know nothing about.
Yeah, we have fridges now.
Huh?
We have fridges now.
Yeah, right. Uh, and then, of course, there was, again, like a lot of other stuff that had to be done, get ready for fall. Uh, the harvest was probably out of the way by that time, and butchering was done, and then all you had to do is feed the cattle and clean the barns, milk the cows, curry the horses, and what else?
Did school ever overlap with harvest? If you waited till Octoberish to do the harvesting, didn't school start?
Now, school usually started at that time, usually the latter part of September, I think, if I'm right. And then, of course, if we weren't done with harvest, I mean, we stayed home and helped harvest. I know then back in 42, that would have been, let's see, I would have been 30, 42. Well, even before that, we were thrashing, and I had to stay home. Even if we had some grain, late grain to be binder or something like that, we had to stay home from school, and get that work done. And then when we went to thrashing, well, then they needed help, so I pitched bundles, helped haul the grain home, and shoveled it off by hand off of a wagon box, hauled it with the horses to the grain bin, to the granaries on the farm. And when that was all done, well, then we went back to school. Boy, that was a relief to getting out of work. But at the same time, we still had to clean the barn and milk the cows before we went to school. And then on weekends, then we had to, clean maybe the chicken barn or the goose barn, or haul hay in the hay mound, for the livestock. And that's
How
about.
early would you start cleaning out the barns in order to make it to school on time?
Well, we had to be in school at 9 o'clock. So I would say, I suppose around, we'd probably have to get up around 6 in the morning, 6, 7 in the morning. So
So then during the winter months, going to school, keeping the barns clean. How long did school last? When were you out for summer vacation?
Jeepers. I imagine March, a lot of part of March, middle of April, somewhere in there. I don't remember. I just don't know.
It didn't overlap with getting the fields ready and seeds.
Well,
and
at that
stuff?
time I was too young. I mean, then the older ones, they went ahead with that work, until school was out, and then there was something that we had to do, and that was to pick rocks. We done that, you might say, like on Saturdays. That some of that stuff was pushed out to Saturdays, so that we didn't miss too much school. So that was a fun time. Oh, we hated that. And then, of course, then it come time to put in potatoes and garden stuff like that. Uh, other than helping plant potatoes, in the spring, that I did help. But other than that, the garden, my mother took care of that. My older sisters, so mostly my mother did that. So.
So what was the least favorite chore to do on the farm?
The least favorite.
Picking rocks or milking the cows?
Well, I think I'd sooner milk cows than pick rocks, put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Let's talk about your family some. Do you remember your grandparents on your mother's side?
Just barely. They lived here in town, and they both died in 1936. So what does that tell you? But I remember them. And my mother, we lived 9 miles, 11 miles out of town. And my mother's family, there was only my mother's younger sister, and she wouldn't do nothing. So my mother had to take care of my grandparents, her folks. And of course, like you say, I was 6 years old, and then there was 2 or 3 brothers younger than I am, and my 2 sisters, they had to take care of the house at home, out on the farm. And of course, how a bunch of boys were, we would get to go along to town, but we would go over to the neighbors, to my grandpa and grandma's neighbors, because they were both sick in bed. I mean, that's all I remember. I can't say that I ever seen them out of bed. So my mother took care of them. Evidently they were, they had to get up to eat or something like that, but I can't say that I ever seen my grandparents walking. I can't, and like I say, I was 6 years old. But then they both died within short distance between the two.
What were their names?
Let's see. Grandpa's name was Ratke was their last name. I'm not sure if I can even tell you Grandma's first name, but I should remember Grandpa's first name. But I know Ratke's was their last name.
Did you know your grandparents on your dad's side? Not at all.
Never did my dad talk about his mother. Never. At the time when we were young, who cared, right? And when we started caring, I mean, he didn't talk about him. But he had a younger brother. My dad had 3 brothers and 2 sisters. And one brother, Dad had him, paid his way to come over here. And the youngest brother, he stayed back in Germany on the farm. He was married and he had 1 daughter. And Grandpa Rost, would have been my dad's dad, was still alive. Grandma must have been dead, but like I say, I don't know. I don't know absolutely nothing about my grandmother on Dad's side. But anyway, back when the war broke out and the Polacks come, and they had to move. Well, my dad's brother and his wife and their daughter, they left the farm. They left. But Grandpa wouldn't go, so they shot him. That's all I know about Grandpa on my dad's side. And of course, his oldest brother, he was drafted in the service. And of course, I forget, it wasn't very long, and he fell. Just got shot. And Dad fled. He come to the United States, just before the war broke out. And then later on, he had his brother come over, which was, that way. And I forget now, but I believe back in the 70s, when my dad and mom, they were out in California, and then they heard that his younger brother had died. Ernest was his name, had died from cancer. And they said he had a severe, hard life, before he died from cancer. And that's all we know about that family. Both my dad's sisters, of course, they're both gone. There's some cousins over there that, one of them that we know of, and there might be, well, I know there's, like my uncle Ernest, youngest, would have been my dad's youngest brother. His daughter, we never got to know her. We knew at one time, I knew her name, but right now we haven't heard nothing. But one of Dad's sister's boys, Arno is his name. He's been over here, him and his wife, and then I think his mother-in-law. But that's quite a few years ago. So that's all I know of that on my dad's side. Like I say, my dad went back to Germany in 1958, I believe it was. And of course, he got to his favorite sister, and then they had to go, through the Berlin Wall to get to the other sister. But they had to sneak him there. I probably shouldn't be telling this. But anyway, after he come home, there was very, very little that he would talk about. I mean, it was so bad, that the way they lived and everything, that he didn't really talk too much about the whole ball of wax, because it was just a rough life for his family that stayed back there, So.
Before he went back to Germany to find his sisters, did he ever talk about his trip over here when he was leaving Russia? Did he ever?
Near Germany. My
Germany?
dad come from Germany.
Okay, did he ever talk about what it was like back then?
Well, it was tough. That's, I mean, they didn't have much. He did go work out, as a hired hand, but that was tough. I guess he was really mistreated. So anyway, they finally took him home again. In fact, they had, I guess, we had sounded, they had to just go out and work and try and earn some money so the rest of the family could live. And like I say, it just was so rough that my dad did not really talk about it at that time. And by the time we got old enough we would have liked to know some, it was too late. I mean, they were gone, and we just, sometimes we'd hear when he would be talking to somebody, we'd just hear a little bit of how things were back there, and they were tough. They were really bad, So.
What was your dad like? What was your dad like?
What was my dad like?
Yeah.
Well, he was my dad.
What kind of a guy, what kind of a man was he? What memories do you have of him?
A lot of them. He was good in a lot of ways. He was strict, hard worker, and like I say, he was a good dad. He was strict. When he said something, he didn't have to. He just looked at you sometimes, and he didn't have to raise his hand too often, and we knew, Ma would always be spanking, but that we'd hold her hand, or, But when Dad, he had trained us so that he, when he looked at us, everybody's different, and I would say, I'm talking about my own experience. I think I got a whipping once from my dad, real bad, and after that, all you'd have to, say a harsh word or something like that, and then we minded. I don't know. I can't even say. I know my sister got a whipping once from Dad, but Clifford and Ann, I don't know if they ever did, that I know of. The younger ones, I don't remember if the younger ones ever ever got a whipping from Dad. I just, not that I know of. But he, like I say, his word was boss, and they knew it. So, and like I say, if he would hit you once, you knew you was hit, spanked or whatever, Not that he was rough, but anyway, you sometimes have to do what you have to do. So, other than that, no, I loved my dad. My dad was good, and my mom was good to us too. Mom was really good to us.
What's your fondest memory of your mom? What's your favorite memory of your mother?
She was a terrific cook. When she cooked, I mean, for the family, and there was 10 of us around the table, I mean, you had to have food, and she had it. And our favorite food was all dough dishes. I mean, that was the whole family dough dishes, dumplings and cheese buttons and strudels and knipfla and German soup, whatever. So uh, no, my mother was a good mother, very good mother. She was never mean or sarcastic. I mean, we had to behave. I mean, and if she thought that we wasn't doing what she wanted us to do, and she'd tell Dad, and he didn't do much more than look at you. Yeah, Mom's the boss. So
So then you listened. What's your favorite memory of your dad?
all of them. I mean, uh, like I say, he was strict, but I can say that he was rough, unless we had it coming. But other than that, we worked. Dad and I, we worked. Now you got me crying. We worked together side by side a lot. Really did. More so, more so than the rest of my brothers. My dad was 40 years old when I was born. When I was 10 years old, my dad was 50. That was an old man. He died when he was 89. 89. He wasn't that old, because I was that much older, and he didn't seem that old at 89 as he did when I was 10 and he was 50. So, he died in 1979, November. 2nd November, I believe it was. Anyway, he had emphysema, and they always said, that emphysema you get from smoking. Well, that's not true. My dad never smoked. I shouldn't say he never smoked, but he didn't smoke steady, and he didn't inhale. He just puffed away, and the only time he did do that when he would get at Christmas time, he'd get a carton of cigarettes from his sister-in-law from California, and probably a can of Prince Albert, and a pipe, which he didn't like. He didn't smoke a pipe. But then he'd get some box of cigars, and those he'd usually smoke Sunday mornings. No kidding. I mean, I remember then when they did go to church, with a team of horses in the buggy, and then he'd light up a cigar. And when that was all gone, then he was done. He didn't smoke no more. But then next year, then he'd puff them away. But anyway, like I say, that last 15 years, 20 years with his emphysema, he had a tough time. And then he died in 79 November, and I was beside his bed. So that took care of that. And he was in a nursing home about 2.5 months. And Mom just couldn't handle him no more. So then when he passed away, well, then she was alone from 79 until 82. And she had a tough time too. She had gallbladder operation. The last operation she had was gallbladder. Before that, she had a big tumor operated out of her here, and then she had fell when she was in California. She had fell and broke her hip. She had that replaced, and
Did you ever hear how your parents met?
uh, his first wife, I don't know. That I really don't know. Because they lived here in town. My mother's folks, they lived here in town. And Dad lived northeast of Cullum here. He was batching out there. And how he met his first wife, that I don't know. But after she died, then my mother, you know, went out there and took care of the kids, helped Dad take care of the kids. And of course, that's how they got together and got married then. So but how he met his first wife, that I can't even think of. I should remember her first name. I know all the other ones, and I should know hers too, but I don't. And then my mother had a sister by the name of Emma and Elsie and Ida. Then she had two brothers, Gus and Otto. And of course, they're all deceased. Oh no, there was another one, Lydia, and I think she passed away now too here, not just too long ago. So there's none of my aunts or uncles living on either side. Yeah, on either side. But just how Dad met his first wife, through who, but in those days, they would have couplers or whatever you call them, that somebody would know somebody, and they'd get them together and something like that. I know my dad done that for two guys that I know of, that he knew the guys, and this one guy I know was originally from Germany too, and they got to know each other after they got here to this area, and then, you know, he got these two guys together that was women that he got to know maybe through my mother. I don't know. So, but how Dad really met his first wife, I don't know. I mean, but I know how he met my mother because, like I say, she was a little bit younger and she was at home, and he had them two kids there, to take care of them. They were small. The boy would have been probably maybe 4 or 5 years old, maybe 3. I don't know. And the little girl, she only lived. She was quite young when she died, because she had pneumonia, and they just didn't have medication for it at that time, as far as we know. So
Did your half brother and sister, did they like your mother when she joined the family and married your father?
well, the little one, the little girl, I don't know if she was ever old enough to know my mother. But well, there's a long history on that, but I'm not going to go all into it. But I know this much: my mother was real good to my half brother, because it would have been her stepson. Also, she was an aunt to him. And I know that she was really good to him. My dad was good to him until he got older, and then he got a little out of hand. So they had a little problem there. But anyway, no, my mother was good to him. She was as good to him, as good as she was to her own kids. No kidding. I mean that, because she brought him up because he was just a real young kid, when she took over, and she brought him up, and she was good to him. So there's a lot of other things that happened in between, but I'm not going to go into that because it's just something that I don't like that the way it was at the time, and just let it be at that. Okay.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay. So
That's fine.
you know.
Do you, since your family since your dad came from Germany, do you remember his reactions to World War II?
My dad.
Yeah.
Uh, the only thing I can say is, see, my dad had left Germany when his oldest brother went to the service, and of course, wasn't like I say, it wasn't very long when he got killed, and that's why Dad fled from there, because he was scared of the, and I guess there's a lot of them did that, because they knew war was coming or something like that, because the way things were, a lot of them fled. So, but my dad's brother, that one that Dad had brought over here, he was in the service over there. Just how long, that I don't know, but I know he was in the service. But Dad left about the time that he would have probably been drafted. He left. They call it fled, or left there, and I just don't remember on the way over in the ship. I think there was somebody that had been here or had some friends here or something like that. That my dad come over, and then he landed in Perm, Minnesota. That's where, and then from there on, some people from Edgeland, North Dakota, they happened to go over to Perm, and that's how Dad got to come over here to this country, from Perm, Minnesota to Edgeland, North Dakota, and then, of course, from Edgeland, North Dakota, he moved south of town here, which was address column, and it's been that way ever since. So,
Do you remember Pearl Harbor or the war beginning?
I don't remember the beginning, but I remember as if it was yesterday when it was called ceasefire or war ended. And I don't, let me just think a little. I know exactly what I was doing when Ma come or somebody come out and said the war is ended. Pearl Harbor was bombed and the war was ended or something like that, I know I was home from school and I was grinding feed. And I'm just trying to remember what tractor I had on the grinder. If I'd know that for sure, then I could tell you what year it was. But I'm not quite sure. It wasn't 40 some, wasn't it? I think, but I'm just not sure. 47? Earlier?
45.
45?
Yeah.
Okay. 45. Oh, yeah. Okay, then I had a John Deere on the grinder. Because in 47 we got an International W9 tractor, and I remember that the day we drove it home, July 4th or the 5th of July, and that was in 47. So in 45, we'd have had that Model A John Deere tractor on the feed grinder. It was grinding feed. In 45, I would have been 14 years old, right? Hey. So now you know what I was doing when I was 14 years old, plus the years way before that, And again, if there was something like that to be done, it was Norman that was doing it. But that's water under the bridge.
So did you not like school as much?
I hated school. I hated school. I would sooner be out there grinding feed or hauling manure than going to school. But no, I did not like school. No.
Just that you'd rather be on the farm?
Oh,
or did
definitely.
you have bad teachers?
No. 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 I can just about name all my teachers through the years, and was from first grade to 8th grade, but I didn't pass the 7th grade. I had to go, the next two half a year, write exams to pass the 7th grade, and then I went in the 8th grade, And that I'm not even sure if I made that right away the first year or not, but seems to me I had a review, the last, or the first whatever, to make my 8th grade. Because like I say, I just didn't care. The only thing I did like was reading, writing, and arithmetic. Yeah. So, but I can name just about all my teachers, but I don't know what grade I was in. All of them. First grade I know was Marion Mock. Miss Mock was my first grade teacher.
Did you like her? What kind of a teacher was she?
She was a nice lady. The only thing that I really, really remember, she boarded at our house. She taught the year before when my sister started, and she boarded at our house. And then the second year, then I started, and she boarded at our house. And the thing that I remember most about her was when I started school, I was left-handed, and she tried to change me. And I told my dad, when I come home, I told my dad, and when she come home, then Dad talked to her, and I'm left-handed today. He said that's what he wants to be, that's what he's going to be, and boy, I'm not sure, but I know my oldest grandson is left-handed, and I don't know if Dustin is left-handed too for sure now, but I know Jesse, that's our daughter's son, and he's left-handed. And I'm not sure, but I think Dustin is too, but she can't talk over there, so I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm left-handed and I stayed that way. But I do write. I do write just like you're sitting there writing, Where some of them, they turn like around like that, and I don't do it. I just write. Not saying that I have a nice handwriting, but I can read my own writing if I have to, So